What if the country's main volleyball cup competition ends up raising more questions than excitement? Today I want to calmly and without any extra hate talk about the Russian Cup, or more specifically its format and the timing of it. Because honestly, I think this topic really deserves a proper discussion. Hey everyone! Today I want to get into a bit of a discussion with you guys, not just share my own thoughts, but also definitely hear your feedback. I'd like to talk about the work of the Russian Volleyball Federation. And again, not from the point of view of criticism, but from the point of view of discussion. And we're talking specifically about the Russian Cup, whose format and schedule have been messing with the heads not only of volleyball fans, but also of the players and clubs involved in this pretty dramatic tournament. This year they came up with an innovative format, and it turned out to be so complicated and poorly thought out that by the second stage, extra flaws had already started showing up. Yeah, there were definitely a lot of twists and turns here. Let's quickly run through the format point by point. Just like last season, the final stage will take place in May, after the domestic championship is already over. A lot of teams complained that by that point they had no energy or emotions left for this tournament, and last year's Russian Cup in May basically confirmed that. Very few teams played with their best lineups, and in some matches you'd even see deep bench guys out on the floor. Naturally, the quality of volleyball really suffered because of that. Yes, it all ended with Lokomotiv pulling off a beautiful and unexpected win, but if you look deeper into it, the tournament still didn't really turn out all that bright or memorable, at least not if you think back on all of its stages. And this season there are even more stages. First, the teams from the lower half of the regular season standings, plus Yaroslavich after returning to the Super League, battled it out in a double round-robin group stage in the fall, and then played 2 more playoff rounds just to determine the one team that would get a ticket. And not even to the final 6 in Moscow yet, but only to the last stage of cup qualification. Fakal from Novi Urengoy won that stage. What exactly that gave them not many people really understood at the time, but more on that in a bit. At the start of the season none of this really looked too alarming, and it even kind of felt like a fun pre-season activity where fired-up underdogs could immediately take swings at the top teams that were still easing into the regular season. But the real heat started in the spring, and unfortunately this was definitely not an April Fool's joke. So the teams that didn't make the playoffs were waiting to see who would get knocked out in the quarterfinals, so they could continue fighting in the cup they supposedly had already been eliminated from. Even though a lot of people had a rough idea of how the system worked, it looked like some clubs had already forgotten they would even have to play again at all. And right at this stage we got a weird situation. MGTU, the worst team of the regular season, was supposed to face Fakal for a spot in the next round, but instead got a free pass because, as I already said, Fakal had secured its place in the final qualification stage thanks to what they did back in the fall. In theory, the teams were supposed to play 2 matches with a possible golden set, and after that there was also supposed to be a group stage. But the federation dropped that idea and kept the 2-match format all the way through the end of qualification. At the same time, the top 2 teams from that qualification advanced to the final 6. And what I want to talk about here isn't even really the tournament intrigue itself, but something a little different. This is where the real discussion starts, and I'm not trying to figure out whether it was fair for MGTU to advance or not. What interests me more is talking with you about some bigger issues. Basically, that's why I brought all of you here in the first place. First, let's take a look at how cup competitions are run in other top leagues. Let's start with Italy, where the format looks much clearer. Their cup also doesn't happen in just one stage. First, the top 8 teams from the regular season after the first half are determined. Those are the teams that make the quarterfinals. After that, it's simple. First place plays 8th, second place 7th, and so on. Half the teams are eliminated in the quarterfinals, and then about a month later the final 4 is held at a neutral venue. The whole league goes on pause and all attention shifts to that event. Even from the level of the broadcast you can tell it's a real volleyball celebration. In Poland the format is more complicated, but in the end it also leads to a Final 4. They have several knockout qualifying rounds where teams from lower divisions can get a chance to go up against stronger clubs. In the end, the top 6 teams after the first half of the regular season moved directly into the quarterfinals, and 2 more teams joined them after making it through qualification. And once again, it all ends with a big event that every volleyball fan is watching. I can't confidently speak on the exact status of the Emperor's Cup in Japan, but during the tournament the regular season takes a pretty serious pause. And there's one really interesting thing there. They have a multi-stage playoff system that isn't exactly easy for a casual viewer to understand, but in the end it still finishes in a familiar format. And almost every time a team from Japan's top volleyball division starts its Emperor's Cup run against a university team. Obviously, it's usually not that hard for the favorite to win, and they can do it without burning too much energy. But just imagine how exciting it is for those students to step on the court against the best clubs in the country. That's an unforgettable feeling and massive experience that can absolutely become the foundation for future wins. And that's genuinely awesome. And almost everywhere the cup is played in the middle of the season, when teams are in their best shape and can put on a great show while fighting for a prestigious trophy. Maybe Turkey is the one exception, where the cup looks a little weird. It's played after the regular season but before the playoffs. Personally, I don't think that's the best timing either. Make sure to share your opinion. Which country's cup competition gives you the most positive emotions when you watch it? I'd really be interested to read your answers. And now let's get back to Russia and this discussion about the National Cup. And the main question is, why was this second chance round even created, where teams get one more extra shot at reaching the final 6? After working inside the structure of a professional club and hearing feedback from colleagues, I became convinced that for the overwhelming majority of teams, this is just extra financial pressure. And judging by the lineups and the quality of play we saw already in the first rounds of the spring stage, not everyone was truly interested in going further. And let me remind you that only 2 teams make it to the final stage from all this. And most likely we're basically going to end up with almost the same 6 teams that played last year in Kazan. Yes, maybe from a drama standpoint the format looks fun, teams get a second chance to finish the season on a high note, but all of those ideas run into harsh reality, and even now you can already say that what we got in the end is a pretty mediocre product. A lot of people probably didn't even notice this tournament was happening because it was being played at the same time as the playoff matches, which definitely are not lacking audience attention. Some teams showed up with the shortened rosters. MGTU and Nova actually played their stage in Moscow, at the old arena of the worst regular season team. Yes, the host got fined for the uniforms and the lack of LED boards, but even that still turned out to be cheaper than flying out to another city. Although, to be fair, those teams did push it all the way to a golden set, and that actually left a pretty decent impression. And this is what I'm really getting at. Right now it's pretty trendy to bash the Russian Volleyball Federation, but I actually want to give them credit for being proactive and trying to look for something new. The problem, in my opinion, is that there are more businessmen and all kinds of officials there, and fewer people who really understand the deeper problems of volleyball and know how to adapt to them. For some reason, there's no proper connection between the federation and the clubs when it comes to finding the best solutions. All I see is that most people complain, but don't make enough effort to push for the changes that actually matter. I haven't worked inside that structure long enough to give rock-solid answers to every question, but I do have one maybe naive thought. If people work together, the league could be made better. And I'm not talking only about the Russian Cup here. With international matches being limited, the federation is trying to add something to the domestic calendar. It doesn't always work out well, but at least the search is happening. And again, the weak point here looks like the direct interaction between the clubs and the league. Even Plamen Konstantinov has spoken about how packed the match schedule is and how it hurts the development of young players, along with other systemic problems. And obviously there's some truth in that, but for some reason it never really goes further than just statements. For example, I spent a season working with Yaroslavich, and a huge amount of time there was spent on travel and flights. You'd think the club is located in the central part of the country, but the road trips were still brutal. Yes, Yaroslavl has an airport, but there are catastrophically few flights from there that can actually get you to the cities where Super League teams are based. On top of that, constant flight restrictions because of increased air safety concerns forced Yaroslavl to first spend 5 or 6 hours getting to Moscow and only then fly to the final destination. And then take Fakel too. For them, basically every match is an away match. They're based in the Moscow region, but play their home games in Novi Urengoy. So when are they even supposed to train properly if there's a match every 3 or 4 days? The packed holiday schedule looked especially rough. In the end, you get fatigue, both physical and mental, and as a result, the quality of play drops and the number of injuries goes up. People often brought up hockey or the NBA to me, where the game density is completely insane, but to defend volleyball, I'd say the jump load here is enormous. On top of that, the Russian league has no regional structure and that increases both the number of flights and the travel distances. Maybe it would make sense to think again about splitting the league into divisions. And let's be honest, hockey has very different budgets too. Most teams fly by charter, not on regular flights, which makes the whole travel situation way easier. And going back to MGTU, the club refused to take part in the youth league because even paying the fine turned out to be a more financially reasonable decision than actually playing in the competition. Yes, here the federation also made a sensible move by holding several-day tournament rounds, which made it possible to train actively and also save money on travel. But what exactly is the point of stages for, say, 13th through 16th place? That's not really clear. Again, it seems to me the federation wanted to give young volleyball players the maximum amount of match practice, but once again everything ran into the harsh world of capitalism, and a club like Yaroslavl had to spend several million rubles just to find out where it would finish in the final standings, even though in reality 13th place gives you no actual privilege over 16th. And once again, this brings me back to the main point. On paper, these ideas were probably driven by good intentions, but in practice they may not just fail to work. They can even have a destructive effect. So a closer connection between the clubs and the federation is definitely needed. Whether we'll ever get there is hard to say. And now here's a question for you, and in many ways it's a philosophical one. What format for the national championship and cup seems ideal to you? What would you like to see more often so that volleyball grabs you even more? Obviously, it's a very broad question, but I genuinely want to hear your feedback. And as always, Nick was with you. Love what you do and you'll definitely succeed. See you soon. Bye.